That's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store. But did you know that Shopify powers in-person selling too? From events to farmers markets to shows, Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere. I've definitely been selling at an event and struggled between reconciling payment processors, inventory before and after the event, and easy reporting. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Prep for your next event with hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/startupcpg, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/startupcpg to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/startupcpg.
The best product is the one that's already bought before it even hits the shelf. That's really important, is like building that demand and creating destination shopping.
I always say crawl, walk, run on every one of my posts. And I think that's what this is about is simply making sure the cart's not before the horse and starting small and growing your business. But the caution is to make sure you have the right partner.
Welcome to the Startup CPG Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Freitag. If you are in the CPG industry and active on LinkedIn, chances are you're familiar with the dynamic duo Alex Bayer and Wade Yenny, co-hosts of the weekly podcast CPG Vibes. They have over 35 years of combined experience in the industry. Alex is the founder of Genius Juice, and you may also know him from his other podcast, 15 Minutes of Genius. Wade is currently the VP of Center Store at the Fresh Market and has held buyer roles at a number of retailers, including Jimbo's, Rouse's, and Bueller Food Markets. For the second installment of our buyer series, I wanted to explore both the buyer and brand sides of the coin when it comes to best practices for working with retail buyers. Listen in as Alex and Wade share about research to do before submitting to a retailer, considerations before sending samples, follow-up etiquette and how to be pleasantly persistent, a phrase we heard just a few weeks ago from Marlo at Partake about their partnership with Ben & Jerry's, tips for promotion planning, considerations for working with regional and national distributors, and more. Hi, Wade. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show today. So happy to have you both here.
Hey, thanks for having us, Jesse. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I echo exactly what Wade just said.
Awesome. Yeah, and it was really nice to meet you both in person earlier this year at Expo West. That was super fun. And then it's great to get to back together again. So I'd love if you could start us off. If you could each, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. And then if, one or both of you could also talk about your podcast, that'd be great just to get us started.
All right.
You go first? Go first, Alex.
I'll go first. Okay. So, my name is Alex Bayer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Genius Juice. Been running our company for way too long, 10 years now. We're going on our 10th year. And it's great. We have organic coconut smoothies. We're distributed in different natural stores across the country. We're also online. Shark Tank in 2020, which allowed us to offer our product online because before Shark Tank, we had almost, zero presence. And then we also are coming out with our Genius Boost Wellness Shots in June. Depending on when this episode is released, it may already be on the market. We're launching June 2023. So that's really exciting. So our main flagship, slogan is that we bring nutrition to the mainstream with better for you products that are functional and make you feel better. And we're now getting into more of the nootropic cognitive space. So that is about our brand, Genius Juice.
Great. Yeah. So my name's Wade Yenny, and I'm currently the vice president of Center Store for the Fresh Market in Greensboro. We've got 160 stores in 22 states. Before that, I've spent the last, call it 20 years, probably too many, like Alex said, but call it 20 years in various degrees in the retail space, in corporate buying and category management, spent time in Ohio and Louisiana on the conventional side of the business, and spent time in California on the organic specialty side of the business. And of course, here now in my current role, it's primarily focused on the specialty and natural organic side of the business. So Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And Alex, who's talking about our little podcast that we do? Is that you? Is that me? Is that both of us? Who's doing that?
I think, yeah, we can tag team it. I mean, that's the best way to do it. Two heads better than one, right? Two bald heads are better than one. So, I mean, our podcast, I'll start it off. It's called CPG Vibes. We, originally we were named, our former name was Friday Vibes. And we realized, well, we'd have to do it on Friday, our podcast for the rest of time. And that may not be possible. So we really wanted to be more about the CPG community, because that's what we are about, supporting the CPG community, supporting the brands. So we actually are now, according to my metrics that I looked up, we are the number one LinkedIn Live CPG podcast, again, for LinkedIn Live. And we love doing LinkedIn Live because, number one, you can't press stop and say, wait, I said something wrong. Let me do that over again. So you're under the pressure of doing it live. But you also get to interact with others in the LinkedIn community, all the CPG people, the David Delcourts, the Scott Hartmans, the Bilals, and everyone else that we love that's, part of our CPG community. So there's comments right on LinkedIn Live where people shout out and we shout them out and recognize them. And I think it's pretty cool. So we love what we're doing. We were in the top 20 in Ireland, Canada, and also maybe Dubai. I'm trying to think of the third.
I was going to say, was it Chile or somewhere?
Chile,
right?
it was Chile.
Yes. We're international, you could say. And I think just to kind of piggyback on what Alex said, I think, we're having fun doing it. It's not a job. It's not a chore. It's something we both enjoy doing, and really just that sense of community in the space that we're in. And it's, for me, it's kind of like a decompression at the end of the week. It's, I come home on Friday and just kind of exhale and just chat, right? And that's kind of one of our taglines is no script, just chat. And Alex and I really, if you can't tell, if you've listened to the show, we don't really prepare for it. So, we might talk about, obviously it's focused on CPG, but we might touch on, what we're doing this weekend or I'm moving or what have you. It's just all over the place, but it's really a sense of community. And, we have guests periodically. Sometimes it's just Alex and I, and, we've touched on a lot of topics that, if you're in the CPG space that I think a lot of people would find useful, whether you're talking about distribution or getting into stores. My background being retail, Alex being a founder, there's just a nice synergy as far as both sides of the business. I think we cover all the walls. So,
yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I love tuning into the show when I can live or, listening on a podcast player. And I'll definitely link it in the show notes. And then I've listened to Alex's 15 Minutes of Genius show in the past too. So yeah, always appreciate the content that you both are putting out in the world and the community that you create. So yeah, today I kind of figured with both of you here and your combined 35 plus years of CPG experience that, we could talk a little bit just about, best practices for working with retail buyers. And we're doing our new buyer series. And, we just want to try to give our community members kind of some tools and some background in, how to best work with buyers, approach with buyers. And so I wanted to just kind of start with kind of a more general open question of, for each of you, when you think of is there anything that comes to mind first when you think of working with buyers, of, best practices or something that's worked really well, or it could even be a pet peeve, but what comes to mind? You're like, oh, I wish people knew XYZ. Anything come to mind, right off the bat that we kind of to start us off?
Well, I was going to say, I've talked about this. I feel like a lot of times I just regurgitate stuff over and over again. But for me, I think the first step is always just knowing who your customer is. And if that customer is shopping at the target that you're approaching as a salesperson, meaning, if, looking at a high-end specialty market, if you're trying to sell a low-end commodity, I don't know, let's call it canned beans, probably not the right fit. So I think for me, it's always knowing your customer and is that customer shopping your target before you even think about where you want, approaching your target. Is it the right target for you? And I think that's the start of things for me. Alex, I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of this whole dynamic is, as Jesse said, you're on the buying side, I'm on the brand side. So they get, the people listening get both perspectives. For me, I mean, I echo what you just said, right? You got to pick the right retailers where your product is going to be a fit, because if it's not a fit and you still move forward on it and you get approved and both the buyer and the vendor don't see that it's not a fit, it's going to be a world of hurt for both sides. It's going to be wasted space, right? It's going to be a slot, 2 slots, 3 slots that are filled, which could have been filled by something else that would have sold a lot better. But on top of that, so the retailer is going to lose money by lost sales. And then the brand is also going to lose money from spoilage and the product not selling well and, having to be on promotion, right? To try to promote your way to better sales, which is never a great way. It's good to do promotions to get the product going and to get it into consumers' hands so they become repeat purchasers. But to rely on promotions is a big no-no, Wade, as you've seen in the past. So, and the only other thing is, how do you treat buyers? How do you follow up, right? All the etiquette, which we've talked about ad nauseum on CPG Vibes, which is, you want to be pleasantly persistent, as Matt Cotton says in his podcast, where it's following up, but being professional, not pushing too hard, and also recognizing that, the buyer is not, they got 1,000 things going on. They might have if they're not responding to your email, maybe there's a reset. Maybe they're on personal leave. Maybe they're not reviewing your category. And this is not a maybe. This is a probably. This is a definitely one of these things. So it's good to, know the signs on when they're not responding. Don't push too hard and just follow up, have a cadence of following up. And eventually when the timing is right, then you can have a meeting, and then also samples, right? Which I want to flip back to Wade, sending samples and how that works. So Wade, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, those are all good points. And I think for me, the word buyer is, people think, they're just making decisions on category reviews, or they're just writing POs or something like that. And I can assure you, when you look at the role of, we're using the word buyer, but if you say category manager, what have you, program director, whatever the case may be, those people touch on so many facets of the business. They're touching supply chain, they're touching marketing, they're touching operations, they're touching merchandising, they're touching all these different buckets of the retail business. And just a fraction of that time is spent actually reviewing a category. Then you have to also, I didn't mention space planning. Where does it go in the store? And all these different things factor into what that person does. And so when, the emails, and they believe me when I say you get hundreds of them, when those become antagonistic or negative, or for the last time, or this is, just very negative as far as following up, that's where that pleasantly persistence comes in, right? As far as having an understanding of what that person's going through, whether it's professional, which I'm touching on, or even personal, whatever the case may be. If your following up is not the right tone, not that you have to treat someone with kid gloves, but if it's not the right tone, it does more harm than good. And really it can be a deterrent as far as establishing a relationship and moving things in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, Alex, you mentioned samples, and Wade, did you want to add anything on the sample piece of sending in samples or getting samples?
I do a series about sales tips from a buyer's perspective, and just kind of give some insight into what I would do if I was selling product from my perspective. So, when I talk about samples, I talk about the first thing is to make sure that you're sending it to the right address. I think that, some of this stuff is just so elementary that it seems laughable, but believe me, when I say that these things happen. Beyond that, you want to make sure your contact information is with the sample. So it's great that you sent this awesome package and, it has this wonderful product in it. But then if I have to Google to find out what the product is or where it came from, you believe it or not, that happens. In addition, it has to be packaged securely. Part of what I'm going to show when I talk about this tomorrow is a package that came in today. I'm not going to name the brand, but it was a box of product that was glass in glass jars. And as soon as we cut the box open, one of the jars was busted and product was leaking all over. So guess what happened with that package? The entire thing went in the trash. Now, there might have only been one jar that was busted, but if you think I or my teammates are going to go through broken glass and seeping products through a package to try and find some, usable product, is not going to happen. And then beyond that, I always say to personalize the package. I always say to make sure, include a note to, address, if you're sending it to me, to address it to me, who it's from, et cetera, just to put a little personal touch on it so that it's not just, an Amazon package that we all get every day. And the last one I would say is, make sure there's two more. Make sure that it was solicited then I know it's coming. I mean, well, it's great to get free things. You think it is. You don't so many buyers, category managers work out of a small space. And if they just got samples all day, there's no space to work, and so people are sending cases and cases of products, and it can make it look like a warehouse as far as their workspace is. The last one I would say is perishable product, to make sure, not only to make sure that your buyer category manager knows it's coming, but also to know that your appropriate refrigeration has to be there, whether it's dry ice, whatever the case is. And then you want to always send that at the beginning of the week, because if you send it out towards the end of the week and it's sitting somewhere over the weekend, in an office or in a UPS facility or something like that, odds are it's not going to be, still good come Monday or Tuesday. So I always say, make sure it's coming. And then you make sure, when your buyer's in the office, because so many people are on hybrid schedules right now that, if you send it on Monday, but they're in the office on Tuesday, they might not get it till the following week. And just to assume that someone is going to be there to receive it, to handle it, to store it until that buyer gets back in the office, that's a bad assumption.
An interesting thing too is that since we started our podcast, our CPG Vice podcast together, we're receiving samples at home, And so Wade's been doing this for a while, so he knows the game of getting samples, and he's used to, a bunch come in and the box, and and then where do you put the samples and how do you handle that kind of volume? Obviously much larger volumes at a retailer than a single person, right? You would think. We have one of our receiving boxes is a UPS store. Okay, it's not a big corporate headquarters. We're not the Apple campus in Cupertino, even we'd love to be, but we're not. So a lot of the mail goes to this UPS store, which is our listed address, just to save money. And there's like boxes to the ceiling that are directed for CPG Vibes, for Alex and Wade. And so I got a little taste of what it's like to get samples. And just, last week I got, 6 cases or 4, almost 6 cases of this energy drink, functional energy drink. And there's just no way, number one, I can fit it in our condo here in LA. Number two, it can't go into the refrigerator, right? We're a 3-person household. And so I had to give some away. So I think it's also sending the right amount as well. I think that's really, really big, because number one, if you send too much, there's no way the buyer is going to be drinking 20, 24 cans unless they just love your product, which would be amazing. So send a small sampler pack, just out of respect for the fact that there's limited space. But yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, more is not necessarily better. And, as an operations person, I appreciate the space planning and thinking through the actual logistics of what a person's space are like before you send them something. So yeah, that's super helpful. And there's multiple things I want to dig into in what you both shared, but I want to kind of go back to each of your first point about making sure that a retailer is a fit for your product. And I'm curious if you have tips for how to research, how to decide, because I think I've heard Wade in particular, I think on a panel you shared a little bit about using Instacart as a resource. And I've shared that with multiple brands. They're like, oh, that, what a great idea. So I'd love, for you to expand on that, or any other ideas have. And for you, Alex, what research you find helpful when you're deciding to pitch to a retailer, so that a brand can, kind of do their homework first to know that they're going to be a fit.
Yeah. So you hit it right on the head for me. I am passionate about that whole aspect of it, simply because in this day and age, there's no reason. You pretty much can be inside a store when you talk about, you mentioned Instacart, but if you go to Instagram and look at their, what is it, Reels or what's the short stories at the top of your feed, follow them on Instagram and see what they're posting on a daily basis. Go to their face, whatever their social medium is that they focus their efforts on. Look at their weekly circulars, go to their website and see what they're promoting in the ad is, and sign up for their email newsletters and see what kind of marketing they're doing via email and all those things. I mean, you can tell a pretty good story real quick just following a retailer for a week. And if you go step by step, all those things I mentioned, if you look at their shop, like you're going to shop their store on Instacart, you do their socials, you sign up for their email newsletter, you do all those things, you're going to find out pretty fast how they're going to market, what kind of products they carry, what kind of products they promote, and just a good idea of, in my opinion, whether or not you're going to be a good fit for that retailer.
Yeah. And a lot of brands are just all about growth, or like, we need to grow. We need to grow. We need to boost our bottom line. We got to, or our top line, I should say. We have investors that we're reporting to. So there's this constant like push and pull that a lot of CPG brands have. And so there's a lot of push and pull on with brands and what they need to be doing. And I think like, the bull market, which was 2014, 15, coming out of the 2008 crisis, going into, the teens of the 2000s into 2022, it's been a huge bull market. And Wade, you've noticed that too. Companies raising a lot of money, new growth opportunities, growing at all costs, very, very slim margins, not profitable at all. That was the model, right? That used to be. And I know this is a hot topic. So when you make the wrong decisions out of just the sake of growth, that's when you start affecting your bottom line and you're losing money, because you have to spend all this extra money to support your product when it should be moving organically off the shelf if it's the right fit with that consumer that's shopping at that store. And at Genius Juice, we made mistakes just like any other entrepreneur. We launched in Publix, we launched in Target, all great retailers. We just weren't ready for those retailers. We didn't have the awareness yet. We weren't pushing people to the store. And we thought, hey, if we launch in 600 Publixes and Publix, they're a great retailer, we should sell, right? Completely wrong. We didn't do the research on all the competitive analysis on the other brands, what's selling well, what's not selling well, looking at the SPINS data. We just went in there because Publix is a great retailer. And what ended up happening is after 4 months, we were discontinued, which I've been very, public about, and no pun intended. And we also spent all this money on advertising, BOGO deals. So, like Wade said, the brand needs to do their research. And also the brand needs to tell their investors, like, look, just because we're not growing this quarter, that's not a bad thing. Let's look at the bottom line. Let's look at the profit, because having a sustainable company, especially in this environment, is more important than growth. And what worries me about this industry is that there's so many companies, just the big guys, that are raising money, and going into new retailers. And they have to keep spending money to make money. So I think like what's smart for, 95% of all brands are under 10 million, right? In revenue and top line revenue. We're all the smaller guys, we're the Mark Samuels of the world. We're the, David Delcourts of the world, where we want to be bigger. So because we're not that big and we don't have an unlimited marketing spend, we just have to be really judicious and careful on where we go and just get to the retailers where your velocity is going to be best and it's going to organically move off the shelf. That's the smartest way to run your business in this environment. And maybe when you get bigger and you have extra marketing spend, then you can take your chance and start going into the larger retailers. But most brands make the mistake where they launch too early in like Kroger and they're in 2,000 stores. How the hell are you going to support 2,000 stores if you're a brand that's doing 3 million in sales and have no marketing budget? It's just so there's a lot of bad decisions that happen in this business, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's what my entry into the CPG industry was at a brand, earlier on during the bull market of, kind of growth at all costs, doors at all costs. And yeah, you end up launching with retailers that just aren't the right fit, or you're just too early. There's not the marketing to support it and you get discontinued. So yeah, those are super important points. And I think, to Wade's point, talking about like looking up the, the promotional flyers and everything on the website of retailers. I think I love that tip, because I think also once you get to the promotion planning stage, which I'd love to hear both of your, insights on planning good promotions, but I feel like that's so helpful, so that when you pitch to the retailer and they say, hey, sign up for our XYZ program, you've already done your research and are like, oh yeah, I noticed that you run this spring sale that I think we'd be a really good fit for because it's all organic products or whatever. Like you then understand where your brand fits into the overall store's promotion, schedule. And I think that could be super valuable when you're like, otherwise, if you're just looking at an Excel sheet of like, well, which promotional thing should I sign up for at this store? If you've been doing your research, you'll know what the stores look like, what the flyers look like, what the shoppers are looking for, and those kind of things.
Definitely. I think, just promotions, we could probably do an episode just on that. But I think when you look at those vehicles that you talked about, I talked about, you can see, is a high-low retailer, is it BOGO driven? If you're in the conventional markets, some of the higher end conventionals, like some of the companies that I've worked with over the years, have monthly flyers dedicated to, whether they call them specialty, whether they call them healthy living or health and wellness, something like that. They put out specialty flyers. So that's a vehicle. But then they've got their weekly ads that is all different on price and really trying to get people in the store. So, there are just a number of things. And I think as a someone from the retail side, I think, for the most part, what I'm looking for, what my team looks for is support, right? What's important to us, what vehicles are important to us, and knowing when you sign up a new brand or you have a relationship that what the expectation is as far as how frequent and just that support's going to be there. Because I say this all the time too, and Alex can piggyback off or just kind of go off on his own. The easy part is getting on the shelf. Alex, his example of Publix and Target and getting on the shelf. I won't say it was easy, but it was compared to selling the product, right? I mean, the work starts once you're on the shelf because typically, especially in this channel, if you're a new brand, you're giving a free fill or slotting of some sort to get on the shelf. And so you're really not even making money until that first product goes out the door and then the retailer reorders product. And so that's when I say that it's getting easy to get on the shelf, you're there. Getting off the shelf is that next step. And that's where that hard work and elbow grease and everything goes into, whether you talk about promotions and socials and just working all those aspects to Alex's point, to move product and making sure it moves once it's on the shelf. And Alex, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, velocity is going to be key. Less locations, more velocity. I mean, that's like most brands need to be running their business that way. Just pick the right retailers. Velocity is king. You can always duplicate your velocity down the road, but brand awareness is also really huge. And I think like the best product is the one that's already bought before it even hits the shelf, right? We talked about that last week. It's like, I think Adam said it. Adam Brown, who was a guest in our last episode. And so that's really important, is like building that demand and creating destination shopping. But it's becoming harder. You know what I mean? Like there's all this noise now. There's social media. There's all this noise. Everyone's trying to, clamor for, your attention, right, on social, and the algorithms are all weird, right? You don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Ad spend, to me, is really hard to get it right, and you have to spend a lot of money to get it right. So it just goes back to my point where I'm a big fan of DSD. We talked about that I think 5 or 6 episodes ago. I'm a big fan of regional, and late game is when you go national, not the first 3-4 years. Like to me, that's like 5-6 years in, unless you got a product that is very different, very special, and you have a lot of VC money behind you to support whatever happens when you go national, all the marketing support. But for 95% of the brands, if you can be regional, you can do DSD, which stands for direct store delivery. So companies like Rainforest, companies like High Touch, companies like Seacoast, right, down in San Diego. Those guys are great, and they pay their entire invoice. There's no chargebacks, or very few, maybe like $5 if, they buy you a coffee or something like that. That's the only chargeback. But, I'm a big fan of going to dependable, reliable partners that will pay you in full, get your product on the shelf. Your business matters to them. So not to go off on a tangent, I think, because Wade knows where I'm going with this. But when you start going to national distributors, it becomes infinitely harder to support and, support the retailers, to make sure that the distribution centers have enough product. You have to have a real great team managing that, or else it's going to eat you alive if you start going national in distribution and retailers.
Hey there, this is Kim on the Startup CPG team. Did you know that over 70% of in-store promotions are not effective, and over 80% of brands will fail while promoting at the shelf? But you have to run promotions with retailers. So what's the solution? Thankfully, PromoMash, the only all-in-one promotion management platform, and Crisp, a leading retail data platform that integrates with over 40 retailers, have developed a joint solution that gives CPG brands a level of visibility and control they've never had before over their trade spend and promo performance. A free 30-day risk-free trial is available exclusively for Startup CPG members. Just go to promomash.com/startupcpg. PromoMash is spelled PROMOMASH. To see for yourself what more effective promotion planning looks like, that's promomash.com/startupcpg, or the link is in the show notes.
Are you looking to get your products in front of 17,000 foodies? Consider exhibiting at the IFT First Conference happening in Chicago, July 16th through 19th. The expo is put on by the Institute of Food Technologists, IFT, and filled with buyers, investors, product developers, research and development professionals, and innovators. There will be a startup pitch competition giving away $15,000 in prizes, plus 100 scientific panels, more than 800 exhibitors, plus the Startup Pavilion featuring 100 food and food tech startups. Booths in the Startup Pavilion are affordable at just $575. The theme of this year's IFT First is Innovation in a Time of Crisis. Can we future-proof the food system? To learn more about IFT First and how to get a startup kiosk, go to iftevent.org. That's IFT as in Institute of Food Technologists, iftevent.org, and the link is in the show notes. Yeah, because I've been following, Alex, your posts on some of the distribution topics. And so I was going to ask, like, for each of you, like, kind of how you balance the, it can, I think brands are like, oh, like, well, once buyers see that I'm in UNFI or KeHE, then, like, that'll be a sign that they'll want to, bring me in. But then they don't have the infrastructure to handle the chargebacks and the, all of those pieces, or to hire a firm for it. So I'm curious for each of you, just a little bit more on the distribution side, like, navigating, finding, those smaller like DSDs and making those work, and how to still build out a great relationship with a retailer that you want to get in without having to use a national player that you might not be ready for.
What did Wade say 5 minutes ago? This could be an entire different episode, right? You might have to bring us back for this one. But without really getting into specifics and getting in the weeds, just regional DSD to me is the best friend for a brand that's emerging, that's natural. I pick up the phone, I can call Czar at High Touch. I can call Amari over at Rainforest. We're not with Seacoast, but I'm sure I can reach that guy, Val, right, at Seacoast.
Yep.
So, and you can go to their office and you can see someone, a human being, right? So I'm a big fan of that. And then you also get better margins, obviously, with less chargebacks. There's some national distributors that are better and there's some that are worse, right? But no matter who you go with, there's going to be more chargebacks through activations, because the reality of this business, which is really a challenge to many emerging brands, is that the big national distributors, and they've said this on record, whoever it is, right, is that they don't make that much money off delivering product. They just don't. Freight rates have gone up, gas has gone up, labor's gone up, workers' comp has gone up. So they have a lot of overhead, their distribution centers. They have a profit center off of chargebacks, right? Whether it's a valid chargeback, whether it's an erroneous chargeback, they make billions of dollars in profit. So this is where it's important that if you're going to go into that ocean, right, where you have national distributors, just go in with two eyes open and know that you're not going to see 100% of your check coming back. And I would highly recommend, I can't recommend enough, to hire a deduction specialist. We've talked about that on our show as well. Someone, whether it's V-driven, whether it's, I work with a great woman named Mary Burnett. She's like just a solo entrepreneur that all she does for 20 years is fight deductions. That's all she does for a living. She knows every code in the book. Getting someone like that can go through your chargebacks and identify this one's valid, this one's not. And when it's not valid, it's not that they're trying to pull one over on you. It's just distributors make mistakes because they're doing thousands and thousands of these processes, right? These chargebacks. So just be careful if you're going to go national, eyes wide open. But I would say direct is the better way to go. I mean, it's an obvious statement, but if you can go direct with Publix instead of KeHE, go direct. If you can go direct with Albertsons, go direct. But obviously there's some partnerships, right? Whole Foods, Sprouts, where you have to go with a distributor. And that's where it gets more difficult for the smaller brands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wade, for you, in your experience with different retailers, like, has a brand not being in a national retailer, like, has that ever, does it affect your kind of like judgment if somebody's like, oh, I'm already nationally distributed? Does that help a brand? Or is it more like their willingness to use say like a regional partner that already works with the retailer? Like, I'm curious how that can influence like the buyer side and your experience, like where a brand's already set up for distribution, or if it's okay that maybe they don't have any distribution and this is going to be their, this is going to be their intro to a regional distributor, this retailer.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. So I've worked for a 4-store chain up to pushing 200, right? And so for a 4-store chain, 13 in Ohio, there are strong regional partners that are probably going to be able to service you and get product in faster. And the other piece of that is, you brought this up, is like if you're a new brand and you don't really have a lot of distribution, a 4-store chain, or probably even 13 for that matter, probably is going to be enough to open up space in one of those national distributors, right? You need a bigger volume to occupy a slot in the warehouse and to be able to have one of those big guys bring you in, right? 4 stores isn't going to cut it. They need, 20, 25, whatever that number is. And so there are typically, Alex referenced some there in Southern California, but there are typically really strong regional partners. And what I would say is I absolutely 100% don't disagree with anything that Alex said. What I would say from a retailer side, and I'm just putting on my hat and not the brand hat, is it's a real fine line, because what I go back to the operational piece in the store. Okay. And so as you get into, let's say, a medium-sized chain, let's call it 10, 15 stores, and you're with a smaller distributor, the challenge becomes, some of the ones Alex mentioned are different because some of those folks write their own orders. So they're coming in and actually taking care of the product. They're saying, oh, I need a case of this and 2 cases of that, and I'm bringing it, and here it is. What I'm referring to is the more small vendors you have, and you have to DSD, whatever you want to call it, and you have to have a separate order for each one of those people. What I say is typically you're going to have one person in grocery or dairy or frozen that's responsible for what we call writing orders, that's responsible for sending the orders, whether it's national, what have you. And unfortunately, when you're looking at, again, I'm talking about a maybe 30,000 square foot store, 35,000 square feet. So not a very tiny one, but a medium size, medium large. Those individuals that are writing those orders, their focus is going to be on their first order, which is that big order, right? It's the national distributor that 70% of their business comes from. And then oftentimes right below that is not necessarily a regional one, but maybe I referenced the conventional chains with a focus on specialty. They have that next one down that is kind of maybe another 20% of their business. So I've got to get that 70% order in because that's the bulk of what's on my shelves. And then that 20% orders is what's left. And then you have these little onesies and twosies to make up that balance, right? And so what happens is the more of those onesies and twosies that you have, the time of that individual writing those orders becomes less and less and less and less. So priority wise, you start with the big boy and you work your way down, and you might not get to that one down here. So sometimes that order might go a day or two before it gets placed, or it might be a week before the order actually comes in. So I agree everything from a brand perspective with what Alex said. I think, I always say crawl, walk, run on every one of my posts. And I think that's what this is about, is simply making sure the cart's not before the horse, and starting small and growing your business. But the caution is to make sure you have the right partner, that DSD partner, that regional partner. There's some good ones and there's some not so good ones. So it's just like with, what we talked about is doing your homework. You talk to a brand that's in the space. You talk to, your peer in the business and say, hey, what was your experience with Joe Vendor? And what was your experience with this person? And before you dive in, make sure what you're getting into. And that way you've kind of got your facts in front of you to make a good decision.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I'm also curious, this is a little more on the, I guess, like operations or setup piece, but I'm curious for both of you on like the organization side, so for Alex, like on the brand side, if you're reaching out to buyers or managing store relationships that you're already in, like what does that look like for you to kind of stay organized? Like, do you use a system? Like, how do you know how often you followed up with a buyer? How do you track, how you've last checked in with someone? And then on the flip side for like Wade, from on your side, like when brands are checking in and saying, hey, like I haven't heard from you or whatever. And then, you've got category reviews where you have submissions, but like, what does it look like to kind of manage those hundreds of emails in your inbox? Like, do you have systems outside of email? So kind of curious, I guess, on the organization side for both of you.
I mean, you have to pick a system that works for you. I mean, like, you can go to Salesforce and there's all these really fancy CRM systems where they notify you like 40 times with 30 different ringtones or whatever, a cow moo and then like a cheetah, roaring at you. No, I'm just kidding. The main thing is that use the system that works best for you. And we're a really simple business. We're not Justin's Peanut Butter or, Koya, right? We're not at 40 or 50 million a year or higher. We're a sub $10 million brand. So we don't have a ton of customers directly. We don't have a ton of distributors. We have less than 5 at this point. So, and we have, less than 10 major retailers that are carrying our product. So I use one which is called Less Annoying CRM. And I love it. It's so simple. That's literally what it's called. Less Annoying CRM. And because it's less annoying, it's so easy to use, and you set reminders for yourself. Or just to go the traditional route, which is Excel spreadsheet, and have a shared Google spreadsheet with your sales team. And what I do with my sales team is every Friday, we go on Zoom and we just share the screen and we just go over our Google sheet. How about this account? How about this account? But what makes Genius Juice more unique now than we were a year ago is with our smoothies, we were going after major chains. We were going after Whole Foods. We were going after, Fresh Market, all these other places, right? And so now we've adjusted our strategy with our wellness shots to go after independents. So the level of care on independents is like really, really big. It's like, did you talk to Jimmy at this store or John at that store? So, but as far as managing relationships with national accounts, don't over check in. And that's where Wade can really, talk about that. Like, don't be like, is everything good? Like every month. It's like, dude, everything's fine. Like the review is not for another 7 months. Just relax, your product's doing great. If it wasn't doing great, you would be hearing from me. So I think you have to put yourself, and Wade will touch on this more, in the retailer's shoes. They got all this shit going on beyond current brands. They got new brands coming in. They have resets. They have discos. They have center store stuff. They have remodels. They have new stores opening. They have stores closing. So like if on the Genius Smoothie side, I'm very careful about checking with retailers only when it's really necessary to submit a promotion or to look at the next review or recommend a swap. Or if I haven't heard from them for 4 months, probably good to send an email to see how things are going, right? Just so you're not in the dark. But you got to be careful not to, not to annoy someone and take up their bandwidth when they have really important things to focus on. What do you think, Wade?
Yeah, I agree. What I would say is like from the retail side is as you're developing that relationship, you should, once your foot's in the door, which I think that's where we're at, that's what we're talking about, is to understand as that relationship's, it's like dating. I used that analogy last week, right? I mean, understanding what that person wants from you. What is the expectation? Is it a quarterly meeting? Is it a biannual meeting? Is it an annual planning session and laying it out? And just really kind of getting the guidelines for what that relationship looks like and what the expectation is. Because believe me when I say from my side, if someone comes to me, Alex comes to me and says, hey, great, we're going to start this. The product's on the shelf. When would you like to talk? Or I said, hey, let's plan out the next year. Let's go for it. And then Alex submits promotions for the next year. That's one less brand that I have to worry about for the next year, right? I mean, he's got his promotions locked in. And yes, maybe he does check in after that first promotion runs and say, hey, how did things go? And there's a little bit give and take, but it's much better than that one that's like, okay, once a month, hey, how's it going? Or, it's a no news is good news scenario. But there's that borderline where if you're constantly checking, it's like, you don't want to be needy, right? Especially if you are doing well or perceivably doing well. There's a line that can be crossed. It's like, this guy just won't leave me alone, and it's like, looking at, in most places, when you look at a category manager, they're not just, until you get to the big national guys, you don't just have, let's say, breakfast category, right? You might have breakfast and I don't know, baking and soups, and you might have 4 or 5 different categories or more. And so if you think of yourself as one brand within those categories. And then you start looking at all the other brands within your category. And then you think, geez, that person also has that category and that category. Their workload, again, when we start going back to what I said earlier about operations, merchandising, marketing, all these different things, and you're one brand within one category, you want to make that person's job as easy as it can. You want to be as unneedy as possible so that they can take care of your business, secure your promotions off shelf if it's applicable, and move on. And you can be a helper, bringing value to them in helping them with their job as opposed to a hindrance. It's like, geez, I got to answer Alex's email and tell him everything's fine. It's just, there's a fine, and in time you develop those relationships where, you're going to have relationships where you get along a little bit better, and maybe it even becomes a friendship. Who knows? But that's down the road. It's not, after years of doing business, it's not just off the bat, that you need that much time from that person. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's everything hit the nail on the head, Wade, with that is also to give buyers, when you should communicate, is giving the buyers a heads up if there's going to be a change of some kind, or there's going to be an out of stock issue, as much notice as humanly possible. Like if in 2 months that you're going to be out of stock on, your original coconut smoothie, let the buyer know in advance, and don't be scared to reach out to the buyer. Oh man, if I tell them that, are they going to disco me because I'm going to be out in 2 months? They're actually more likely to keep you because you're honest. If you're out for 6 months, that's a different story. But if you're going to have a hiccup in your supply chain, everyone goes through that, especially in these times, especially a year ago. It still happens a little bit now, not as much as 2020 or 2021 during the pandemic. But honesty and transparency and getting out ahead of it is a huge value to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. And Wade, too, I was curious on as far as, tracking incoming leads kind of things, like, we talked a little bit about, you got category reviews, but like if a brand is checking in too often or not enough and all that's just like sitting in your inbox, is that where it lives generally in your different buying experiences? Did those notes do you consolidate notes somewhere on different brands so that when it comes to category reviews, you can be like, oh yeah, this brand seems really eager. This one's a little too eager or those kind of things. Like I'm curious how you just manage all that information that lives in the inbox to translate into when it's category review time.
I can see like a folder, like one folder, do not respond to them. They're annoying. The next folder, they're kind of cool, maybe 3 months. And then this folder, I love this guy. I'm responding this week. I'll go ahead.
So speaking for me personally, if it's in my inbox, it's something I have to deal with or I haven't addressed yet. If it's someone using your example that's constantly, regularly following up, that's probably going in the delete box. What typically happens is you got, on your share drive, your personal drive, what have you, you've got a folder for your category. Here's my category reviews. Here's this category. Here's where I'm at with submissions. Here's where I'm at with, and just kind of, working it through that way so that when I go to look at, I use the breakfast category, so I'll stick with it. So I go look at the breakfast category. Here's all my submissions. Here's everything that's come in. And then I typically would have a subfolder for General Mills, Kellogg's, Quaker, and so on. And then inside that folder, you can put in all your, emails or anything like that. If not on your share drive, hard drive, what have you, same thing on your email, right? You create a subfolder. Here's this category. Here's this vendor. Here's promotions. Here's new items. Here's, things like that. So some kind of filing system like that so that you can reference and going back to, when you're getting those hundreds of emails, you don't necessarily want them to live on your inbox because you might not remember someone's name, especially if it's a new contact or, you want to be able to go back to the brand, or look at it by your categories to see who's reached out to you and where you're at in the process.
I got a question for Wade, actually. I know Jesse is asking the questions, but I have a question for you, especially really dating back to more in Ohio as a CM, a category manager, and also at Jimbo's, because you were managing a tremendous amount of different categories in that store, right? It's a smaller team, right?
Yep.
How do you avoid review fatigue? Like looking at all these items and because you want to give the attention that every presenter, founder, whoever deserves with their product, with their story. But after like 5, 6, 7, 8 meetings, especially in these times where it's all by Zoom and it's hard to get away from vendors all the time, not saying you want to get away from them, but you want to get a break, right? How do you manage that fatigue to make sure everyone gets the attention they deserve? Because I imagine that's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And so what I would say is those processes, we were a lot more nimble at both of those examples you gave in Ohio and in Jimbo. So we didn't follow necessarily a traditional set in stone review calendar. We were more plug and pull, or, just able to act a little bit quicker. So you weren't, looking at, again, I keep using the breakfast category, and okay, it's time for the breakfast review. It was like, okay, I might look at my first meeting today is a cereal brand that wants in. My next meeting might be a coffee brand that wants in. My next meeting might be an ice cream brand that wants in. So what I did at both of those examples is based on my workload and internal meetings, which are always a thing, no matter where you're at. I had designated days on my calendar where, okay, this is the day or days of the week or the month that I'm going to see vendors. And as my workload grew or diminished, I could adjust that accordingly to accommodate. And then I got to a point in Ohio where I was so far in the weeds that if you were a new brand reaching out to me, I had kind of like a form letter. I had an assistant, and she would say, if you're interested, here's what I need from you. I need this. I need, sales sheet. I need a sample. I need this, and just very, very structured like that. You're not going to get a meeting if you're a new brand, because my existing workload with current brands, because at that point I was handling grocery, dairy, frozen, our warehouse facility, direct store delivery with all the Coke and Pepsis and Frito-Lays and all that of the world. So I had a huge amount on my plate of existing business, new business. I wanted to see product before I even said, in the beginning when my workload was smaller, I'd take an appointment with anybody. I'd give anybody the time of day. And then it kind of gets like, okay, it's only this day and this day. Now it's only existing vendors. And it just kind of developed over time. But I think that's where, if you're a good category manager or whatever role you want to call yourself, you really have to balance yourself with what you can do with existing business, what innovation you're looking for, and then of course everything else internally that you have to do as far as your normal day to day. So that was me. You ask 5 buyers, they might give you 5 different answers, but that's how I handled it.
Cool.
Yeah, great. That's super great. And I think the 3 of us could probably talk for hours. I think there's so much here. But I think for today, that's a great note to, kind of wrap our conversation up on. But I also want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you both and your show. So I'm going to link in the notes each of your LinkedIn profiles. And Wade, as you mentioned, I've been following your kind of tips that you've been providing on LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody to check those out. Follow Alex, and then you can join the show live on LinkedIn. And then if you want to check out Genius Juice, that's geniusjuice.com. Super simple, so you can get there. But so when is the show each week? What's the best way for people to tune into your show? And any other links that you'd like that you want to shout out that I can add to the show notes for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take this one, Wade. It's really simple. We broadcast, unless there's some kind of change to our travel schedule, for 97.3% of the time, we are on Fridays for CPG Vibes, our CPG podcast. And it's at 2:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5:30 Eastern. And as Wade said, we do bring on guests, maybe 2/3 of the time, and then other third is just us. We also give away prizes and giveaways at the end of each episode. So we have a sponsor, and then that sponsor gives away a case worth usually at least $70, $80, even over $100. We had some that have been over $1,000 or even $2,000, like Yuval's, over at CP Genius. And so that's part of the perks of listening to our show. So anyway, you can also catch us on Apple Podcast, CPG Vibes. And Wade, we got to say it. Give us 5 stars, please.
Right.
Give Startup CPG 5 stars.
Exactly.
And then go to us and give us 5 stars.
Go do, 2 birds with 1 stone. One time in the app, 5 stars for both podcasts. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure. I love it.
Like
yeah.
it.
And if you're following both Alex and Wade on LinkedIn, you can usually earlier in the week, you kind of tease who the guest is if you're going to have a guest on the show. So that's always fun. You can add it to your calendar right within LinkedIn so that you make sure you can join live. And yeah, definitely encourage everyone to check out the show. And I'm so glad that you both joined our show today. This was super fun. I love hearing your insights. Look forward to continuing to listen to your show. And yeah, thanks just to you both so much for being here.
Yeah, it's been great. Really appreciate it, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having us. And thanks for your support also at Expo West, letting us use your Startup CPG booth for our little, our little CPG Vibes happy hour. We really appreciate you and your partnership.
That was awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely.
I'm so honored you joined me for this conversation, and I love hearing from you all with feedback, suggestions, or if you just want to say hi at podcast@startupcpg.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode, we'd love for you to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and maybe even leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you aren't yet in our Slack community of founders and experts, we'd love to see you there. You can get the free invite at startupcpg.com and find all our other awesome resources there, like webinars, databases, the blog, the magazine, and virtual and in-person events. And if you found yourself rocking out to our intro and outro music, which I do every single time, make sure to check out the Super Fantastics on Spotify. It's the band of our Startup CPG founder, Daniel Scharf. I'm Jesse Freitag, your host and producer, and on behalf of the whole team at Startup CPG, thank you for being here and see you next week. Thank you for listening in today.